Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. This is your co host, Posh. We've got a new episode for you today, and we're excited that you made it here. But before we get going, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and then subscribe to the newsletter. Get some new updates from us, some exclusive content, things that nobody else has. And oh, one more thing, enjoy the show. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. I'm your co-host, Posh.
I'm Pat.
And we are so excited to be with Dr. Howard Murad today. He is the founder of Murad, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of and you've seen on several shelves in the past 2-3 decades. And we're excited to share Dr. Murad's story today and hear from him about his personal story and how he got his entrepreneurial journey going. So, Dr. Murad, thank you for joining us today.
So glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start from the early days? I know you were born in Iraq in the Middle East.
Correct.
Take us through that journey a little bit.
Well, actually, my family for generations have lived in Iraq. And there was a time in the mid-40s, 1940s, where there was a lot of problems and religious problems and things like that. And we were very fortunate to be able to have the ability to come to the United States. It was a challenging situation for us, but we were able to leave a dangerous place and come to the safe haven of the United States. And if I can thank anything, I would thank my ability to have traveled and lived in the United States. Had I had to stay in Iraq, I probably would have had a much different life.
So when you came to the U.S., around how old were you and what was like the first thing you did?
Well, I was 7 years old. And when I was in Iraq, I went to the French school, Alliance, and I learned a couple of words of English. And the only words I knew was, "Give me your hand." I'm not sure why I learned that, but that's what I learned. And so we got off the plane, and my uncle came and greeted us with some of my cousins. And I said, "Give me your hands." I don't know what they thought, but so we kind of started a conversation. And the one thing that was very interesting is the ability to have a plastic mind when we're so young, that I was able to pick up English in relatively a short period of time. There was no special class or special learning. They sent me immediately to the second grade. And within a month or so, I was speaking English without an accent. My siblings, I'm the youngest of 6, were older. The next sibling age was about 12. And she still has an accent. So you could tell she's from a foreign country. But I don't have one, other than because I lived in New York, I probably have a New York accent.
What were your parents involved with when they were in Iraq, and why did you end up, choosing, or why did they end up choosing to come to, New York?
Well, my father was a businessman. He sold something called copra. Copra was in nutrition, which is just basically dried coconut. And that was something that he imported from India, and he sold it in Iraq. So that was his business, and he was relatively successful. We had a nice home. We had some servants. And when we came to the United States, we had to leave everything behind us. So we arrived here relatively penniless. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, my uncle was there to help us, and he supported us for a while. And as a matter of fact, found a business for my father to go into. My father became a silent partner, and he would be learning, basically selling material, large amounts of material which people could make clothing from or whatever. Unfortunately, the partner cheated my father, and we ended up penniless. We moved from a nice house into a tiny apartment, like 400 square feet, 600 square feet, excuse me. And so we all lived in this little place, and we all found jobs. Even when I was 8 years old, I was delivering newspapers. I was going next door and helping gardening, things like that. After a while, when I got older, I was a pin boy. There were no machines in the bowling alleys, and I used to set the pins at night. There are different odd jobs all along. Everybody worked in the family. And there were times when there really wasn't even enough to eat. Sometimes all eight of us would have one chicken and a whole lot of rice. And that was a lot. And there were times even that wasn't enough. And I remember one time all we had was onions. So my father said, "We have a lot of onions and a lot of bread, so we'll eat and we'll be full. We will at least still have food to eat." So there were, difficult, challenging times, but we picked ourselves up from our bootstraps and we managed to do everything. My siblings, the older ones, were able to go to college at night and work during the day. My oldest brother, who had finished pharmacy school in Iraq, came back, and then he had to take 2 extra years in the United States and became a pharmacist. And gradually, he himself, after working many years, ended up having his own pharmacy. My next brother was into mathematics, and he ended up being an accountant. Two of my sisters had different jobs. One actually just went to secretary school and learned to type. And the other one actually worked in a clothing sales store, and she was able to get a job there. And eventually, she got married, and she and her husband opened some stores themselves. So little by little, every one of us was able to become successful. And I guess that's the story of the United States: the ability to come here and work hard and make something of yourself.
Yeah, and it's like this classic sort of immigrant story that we hear often, where wherever you're originally from, you have this career, and you have this great job, and it could be in healthcare, it could be in legal field, it could be in anything. But once you immigrate to the U.S., a lot of people are sort of unable to find a similar job or career, and they have to just adapt and figure it out. And so it's no wonder that a lot of immigrants who come to the US end up becoming entrepreneurs, or starting their own business, or working in a small business. So that's why we see a lot of successful entrepreneurs in the US. Their parents were immigrants, or their grandparents were immigrants, which is really interesting. And so I guess for you, like, as a young kid, did you have this like entrepreneurial bug in you? Like, did you foresee that one day you would start and run your own business, or was it just something that I guess was that something that was in your mind?
Well, actually, I never had a roadmap, and necessarily, but somehow or other, what was imbued from my parents to me is that I would always be successful. Didn't matter what it would be that. So I think that was really very important. When you have this parental love and the parental love to allow you to become the best that you can be, regardless of what that happens to be, I think that's very important. So, in a way, not having a roadmap was very good because my potential was unlimited. And as a matter of fact, as I look through the challenges that I had when I went to college, I really thought I wanted to be an engineer. And one of the things about learning from your failures, I think, is important for me. I learned that I wasn't destined to be an engineer. I couldn't do calculus and the math in college, even though that's what I thought I wanted to be. It was a time of Sputnik, and everybody was going into that kind of field. And so I decided. My oldest brother was a pharmacist. He said, "Why don't you go to pharmacy school, and at least you'll have a job, and you like science anyway." I did go to pharmacy school, but in the back of my mind, when I got there, I said, "Yeah, I should go to medical school." And here's another thing I think we have to learn is that we cannot accept that the idea of I probably can't do it. Because in my mind, I thought, well, all those other people in medical school, they've got to be much smarter than me. And so I probably won't be able to make it. So I'm not even going to try. And little by little, I said, what the heck? What do I have to lose? If I don't make it, it's the same as not trying. But if I try and I make it, there's a chance I'll make it. There was a little time where I was studying finals with my friend in pharmacy school, and his uncle came by. He was a doctor in California. I was living in New York at the time, and said how wonderful California was. It was brand new. That was way back in the 1960s. And medical was a great field. You guys should think about going to medical school. And he encouraged all of us to apply, and I applied, and I got in. And that was a big challenge. And I think if I could help anybody, I would say, allow the unique you to blossom. Make your journey without a destination. Words like that. And over the years, I've created hundreds of what I call insights, understanding my life and understanding how I could help others with my insights, sayings, affirmations, some people call them. So the idea of being able to make the best of who you are is so important. And so many of us, all of us, have potentials beyond our wildest dreams if we only unlock that key and allow it to happen.
Would you say the medical field was something that you were extremely passionate about when you started studying it in school, or was the reason for going to medical school more from maybe pressure from parents or society, or just that was like one of the paths to having a successful career?
I don't know the answer to that question. All I can tell you is, obviously, becoming a doctor is something that anybody would want to aspire to, or many people would anyway. And I guess in the back of my mind, I did want to aspire to it. I had terrible acne when I was a child, the pizza face look of some people, and we didn't have enough money to go to a doctor. So, all I did was wash with soap and did the best that I could. I did manage, but realizing that, I could help other people who had similar problems that I did was something that led me to that path. And then going to pharmacy school and learning about all the medications and the drugs. And that also was another way that encouraged me to try to go to medical school. Again, to me, the big lesson for my going to medical school was the ability to not limit yourself, don't limit your potential. And if I could give anybody a little bit of a boost, I would say the worst thing that'll happen is that you won't get in, or you'll lose the attempt, but at least try, and try really hard and make it a passion. And if you can't make it, then maybe that means this one door closed and there's another door that you need to open. Just like me, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but that door closed and I found another door. For whatever reason, that's where I was supposed to go.
Dr. Murad, that's obviously a very inspirational story, and one that I think a lot of people can resonate with in terms of when one door closes, another opens, and that we need to embrace those opportunities, right? I know you eventually ended up at UCLA's VA medical school or VA hospital for your dermatology residency. Where did you go to medical school, and when did you eventually make the move to California?
Well, actually, I was born in 1939. I'm 81 years old. And I moved to California in 1962 to go to medical school. I graduated in 1966 from University of California at Irvine, UCI Medical School. The one thing I could tell you about that is when I was in medical school, what I aspired to be was a surgeon. I really was interested in surgery. And as a matter of fact, when I finished medical school, I did my internship, rotating internship back in New York. And I had a residency to do a surgical residency. But I was drafted in the Army and I was sent to Vietnam. And
Wow.
in Vietnam, I had my fill of surgery. At that time, unlike what it is today, which is a volunteer army, we were all drafted. And was drafted as a doctor and was sent to Vietnam. I was a battalion surgeon and did surgery. Um, when I came back, I was assigned to my own clinic, but also to the dermatology clinic in the afternoon. And at that point in life, I became interested in dermatology.
And Dr. Murad, if
And
you don't
so,
want to talk about it, that's also very fair. But how was your experience like in Vietnam? Working with you know these soldiers who were, I assume, hurt and needed you know your services at that time.
yeah, well, I was a battalion surgeon, so I got to see the injured people first. At that time, the way it happened is a soldier got injured or had a cold or whatever, would go to see me at the battalion surgeon, battalion aide. That was in the boonies. That was way out, not in the big major bases, and that's where I was. So I would see these people, and there were incidents that were really impactful on me. One of them that was really impactful when I went to Vietnam. The idea was, well, we were going to stop the spread of communism and we were going to make the world peaceful and better and all kinds of things. And I thought, well, I know we're all going to suffer, but the world will be better. And one of my very first patients was a young gentleman. He was a second lieutenant, an officer, the lowest level officer. He had finished law school, had just gotten married, and he was drafted. He came to see me because he had a cold or something like that, nothing serious. And he went out and they brought him back within a couple of hours. Somehow we went over a landmine or something and he was paralyzed from the neck down. And there are numbers. There are 500,000 people who are injured, 50,000 people killed, whatever the numbers are. They're just huge and they don't mean anything. But that one incident was very impactful for me, that war is not worth it. It's not. There's got to be a better way. And, we always can be encouraged to have wars and things, but somehow or other, my mindset really, really changed. It was a very impactful year. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. I experienced a lot. Um, and I'm I'm grateful that I came back healthy. Uh, I'm grateful that I got that experience, but I wish I didn't.
So when you did come back, what ultimately made you want to get into dermatology?
Well, that's the next story because the first year was in Vietnam. Second year, I had my battalion aid station where I was just a general practitioner in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I was assigned to the dermatology clinic. And by that time, unlike when I was in medical school, when I said dermatology was boring and not anything I would enjoy, um, I guess that experience in Vietnam turned me into enjoying dermatology. And so I applied to a residency at UCLA Wadsworth VA Hospital residency and did my residency for 3 years at UCLA Veterans Hospital.
So talk to us a little bit about sort of the era, the 60s, the 70s, even the 80s when it came to, dermatology and paying attention to one's skin, the health of, the health of their skin, the health of their body. Was it, I'm sure it was a lot different than today, but like how was it like? Was there even that much of a thing around then, or was it still very small?
Well, actually, dermatology then was medical dermatology. And, in 1966 to 1969, when I was doing my residency, we were trained in only medical dermatology, which was psoriasis, eczema, skin cancer, things like that. And the concept of going beyond that was unusual, and there were things that we were at that time. It was dermatology and syphilology, so we learned a lot about syphilis and diseases like that, gonorrhea and things like that, communicable diseases. So, as a dermatologist, most dermatologists went into practice and they were treating psoriasis, eczema, skin cancer, things like that. If a patient came to the dermatologist and said, my face looks haggard, I look aging, I got wrinkles, don't worry, you're just getting older. And that was the end. There was no conversation beyond that. So that's the state of dermatology in the 1970s when I started my practice. I tended to feel a little differently because when patients came in, I would always ask about them generally instead of just wanting to treat their condition. So over time, I had a large practice, maybe because people felt comfortable with me, that I cared about them, that I was concerned about them, not their disease, because their disease was just part of them. So way back in the very early 1980s, I had an electrologist who worked in my medical practice. And after a while, I had an esthetician who also worked in the medical practice. So in a way, in the early 1980s, I had what people would now call a medi-spa. At that time, also the beginning of injectables, not the Botox that we talk about now, but collagen injections and the beginnings of lasers and things like that. So things were beginning to go in the way of cosmetic dermatology as well as medical dermatology.
When you first launched your practice, you weren't someone that inherited a practice from your father or mother. It was something that you started yourself. So how did you spread the word and start getting people to come to you? Like what were those early days like? Because I can imagine it's just like any other business. When you're starting, you have to get customers.
Right. Well, when I started, I had just finished my residency. At the time, it sounds like a little, but it's not quite that little. I think I was paid like $3,600 a year. That's a long time ago, but I didn't have a lot of money. We lived in an apartment, and I had an old car. And to make ends meet, I would work nights in the emergency room. Part-time, I would go do insurance physicals. I'd go to people's homes and then do a little physical, and it was an insurance physical. I would get paid for that. And I decided to open up my own practice. I think it's a challenge right now, but at the time, it was still a challenge, but not quite what it is now. I started in a very small office. It was about 400 square feet. When I first moved in, I asked people to help me decide what I should get. So I went and bought used furniture for my waiting room. I used used equipment to use in the back room. Um, I I I had my first office was very small. It was maybe 400 square feet. It was before me. It was rented by a psychologist or psychiatrist. And I remember the first week I had patients. What I did, I had my cards. I hired a nurse. Somebody had referred her to me. She was very sociable and very nice. And she knew I was starting out. I told her I can't pay you so much right now, but as soon as I grow my business, I will give you a better salary than you would be getting normally. Um, and I walked into the office, and instead of just sitting there, I went all around the town, went to every doctor I could go to, and left my cards there with the doctor. And I wouldn't see the doctors; they were busy most of the time. I would talk to the nurses in the front, and if I could see the doctor, I'd say hello. I just moved in. I'm a dermatologist, this and that. And I remember my very first patient. I was sitting there. I didn't even have a sign on my door. It was that beginning. And this was my second or third day, and I had just come back from doing my rounds, seeing other doctors, and this person walked in. He had a rash, and it had no sign. I don't know how he ended up with me, but so I said, "Oh, I really have my first patient." And I remember in the beginning, I think it took me about 2 or 3 months where I got to a number. I said one week, I had 30 patients. So it grew from those humble beginnings to at this point, I've seen well over 50,000 different patients. My practice really flourished over time, and I was a very busy dermatologist.
Obviously, over the years during that practice, you were, very well known, especially in that community of, skincare. And, if I'm not mistaken, you ran the Medi Spa for about 15 years or so. What are some of the biggest things that you learned during that time that eventually became, almost, or what laid the ground eventually for you starting your own product line? What are some of the things that you learned from your patients, from the overall, industry itself? What were people suffering from, and how were you able to, heal them, or, essentially, prevent some of these things down the line?
Well, I would go back again to the 1980s, mid 1980s. At that time, if you went to get skincare products, it was very simple. It was cleanse, tone, moisturize it. There was nothing to treat. And if you wanted a treatment, you would have a medical treatment, with the dermatologist with a prescription, maybe antibiotics, topical agents, and prescriptions of different kinds. Um, and the idea of the word cosmeceuticals didn't come out until quite a bit later in the late 80s. And that the first cosmeceutical was called Retin-A, but Retin-A really wasn't a cosmeceutical. Because a cosmeceutical means a cosmetic that acts like a pharmaceutical. So in the beginning, I used to compound prescriptions for my patients. So they would come in and they would have different issues, and there was nothing quite available. So instead of writing a prescription that was available that wouldn't be good enough, maybe I would ask, because of my background in pharmacy, I would write a compounded prescription. They would go to the pharmacist and get it filled. I became involved in what I think is the first cosmeceutical, which is glycolic acid, alpha hydroxy acids. And I started using those on my patients. I actually worked with people and offered my patients these glycolic acid based products that were having enormous benefits on my patients. So the ones that worked the best were ones that were helping with acne, with wrinkles, with pigmentation. And so I decided that at that time, two things. One, before I started my product line, I decided rather than just have the idea of sort of a med spa in my medical practice, to have an outside medical med spa, a real med spa. So I opened a med spa called the Sense of Self, about 20 miles away from my medical practice. I didn't actually see patients there, but all of the estheticians were trained by me. Every single one of them spent a couple of weeks following me around, seeing patients, knowing what skin cancers look like, knowing what diseases look like, things like that. And formed my product line called Murad in 1989 and decided around that time that I was going to try to make that something that would be available not only to my patients, but to the world at large. So I
And
remember during that time, I started a business. I had no business experience. I found a person who said he knew how to start businesses, but was not really good at continuing it. I said, okay, well, I need to start a business. And he found me. Actually, he designed the packaging on the business that I was going to make. And by that time, I was doing well as a dermatologist, and I had some funds on my own. Um, and I I decided to go to trade shows where estheticians were. So I began to build a business little by little. At first, I had him as the only employee, and he helped me get other people to help me with marketing and things like that. Eventually, we hired different people, and little by little, the business grew. Um,
and Dr. Murad, it's really refreshing to hear your story because I think a lot of people don't necessarily, view doctors as business people, right? I think first and foremost, if even me, I consider doctors medical professionals who are there to treat and help prevent, their patients from, serious diseases, infections, etc. But it seemed like, throughout your journey, you were always just thinking ahead, always, envisioning new things, trying new things, and trying to innovate, right? Why do you think, or, what were you motivated by, and why do you think you were that way as opposed to just being a dermatologist, seeing your patients, going home, enjoying life?
you know what? It's a very good question, and I don't have a very good answer. I can tell you it goes back to when I was a child, and the idea that was imbued with me was that I had unlimited potential. I didn't limit myself. And I certainly was not a good business person because I can tell you what happened to me with the beginnings of my business is at some point the person that was helping me, he said, we didn't end up helping because he said, I can't do any more for you and I can't help you. I hired different people and I was cheated. There were people that were working for me that actually, because I had no idea about finance, um, the finance people, some of them just stole money right out of the checkbook, and I had no idea. They gave me they said, "Here's a bill, you got to pay it." I paid it, and turned out it was a bill that ended up going to their cousin or something like that. So I had a lot of things like that going on. There were people when I had product they just took it out of the warehouse and they sold it on their own. Um, I also was looking at, I guess a good word for me to tell you is the path to success comes from failure because you need to fail in order to succeed. Here's another really good example. I was doing quite well selling my product to salons only. I tried selling to doctors and that just didn't work for me. And then I decided, well, why do that? And why shouldn't I sell to a broader audience? And somebody suggested to me, why don't you do an infomercial? Infomercial gets you all out. And so I didn't have enough money, but I borrowed on my house. I took a second on my house. And again, here you have to be willing to risk in order to succeed. You have to be willing to put all of your energy. So I made the packaging, I did the marketing, I had people help me do an infomercial, and I sold zero. I really was just waste of, there was no money, and it was a big loss. I had all kinds of products that were just sitting and packages and nothing. Um, And a couple of years later, I said, you know what? And the reason I did it, I made sort of a mistake because I was ahead of the curve. In that infomercial, I had two sisters, one who was doing skincare using my product, and the other sister was not. And the one who wasn't using my product had bad skin, and she had to learn, and she learned how to use the products. She got better. And that was the story. But at the end, it didn't work. That wasn't right. What was right was what was everybody else was doing, where people sitting around on their sofas and talking about the product and seeing before and afters. So the first one was a total failure. The second one was a couple of years later, and I had regained. I paid off my mortgage a little bit on the house. I began to have a little bit of extra money. But in order to do this, I had to really borrow more. So I borrowed again, second on my house, and had personal loan, and I gave everything. If I was going to fail then, I was probably going to fail, period. And that one was a huge success.
When you first launched, were you still practicing?
I was, and I worked my tail off. I was home maybe 100 days a year. Every single weekend, I was out doing trade shows or doing classes. I remember one year I did, I think about 16, 17 different trade shows all across the country. And when it wasn't a trade show, I'd made my own little thing and invited different people to come to a class at a hotel. Um, and um, and then I began to do a little bit of international. So there were many times I was gone for a while. I still also practiced, and little by little, I couldn't do both, and gradually minimized my practice, but still kept a little bit of a practice over time. But in the early days, I was practicing full time, working full time, 20 hours a day almost.
Dr. Murad, you talk about some of those failures that you had in the early days of launching the product. What was it that kept you going after you kept failing? I know you mentioned, these failures led to success, or, you have to fail in order to succeed. But what in your mind told you that you were doing something right, that you were onto something, even if, the sales necessarily weren't showing that to be true? What motivated you to go on?
Um, again, it's the passion, and when you feel that you really are onto something, it's important to really continue despite some losses. I mean, there are times when it would have been very easy to just say, why the heck? What am I doing this? I could relax and just see my patients, and it would be fine. I love seeing my patients. I learned so much from them. I love seeing them, and they love coming to see me. And that would have been enough. But somehow or other, there was something in me, and I wish I could tell you that. But I do have a lot of my sayings. I have over 600 sayings, which kind of express all of these things I'm telling you about. Um, I have my own blog. It's called drhowardmurad.com. If you want to look at it, we have all of those insights. But I learned somehow or other from my father, who actually he failed and he didn't go forward. He when we came to the United States, he failed at the first store where my uncle helped him. Then he opened another one and he failed, and he ended up actually being 100% broke. We moved from a big house to a little tiny apartment, and he worked as a messenger in New York. At that time, messengers just there was no email, there was no fax. You had a piece of paper to deliver, you just take it and send it. And you work for minimum wage, and all of us worked. And all of us worked very hard, but he never complained. He was always happy. His favorite words were, I hope you'll be older than me and happier than me. He lived to be almost 100 years old, and he never complained about anything. He was always happy. So I think what helped me there was looking at him and saying, what's the worst thing that could happen to me? I would be stuck eating an onion sandwich and I'd be full and I'd have a roof over my head and I'd have my family. So the idea of understanding if you really want to go for something, you have to be willing to risk. I don't know how that is, but that story of my father really was sort of what you learn from your parents, not what they tell you, but their experience and what it was. So for me, that was it. But I would tell everybody, if you're really passionate about something, go for it. And if you fail once, try again. If you fail a second time, try again. At some point, you might want to give up, but um, really, if you're really passionate and you believe in yourself, you usually can make it, because when you're that passionate, you will find a way to be successful.
So when you first launched Murad, the business in the 80s, like pre-e-commerce, pre-direct to consumer, the only way through to a consumer was through some sort of retail establishment, or I'm not even sure what other options there were. But like when you first launched, how were you getting the product to consumers? Like what was your sort of distribution strategy?
Well, I didn't realize what the names were. The word omni-channel didn't exist at that time. But what I did do is I started out selling only to salons. And then, as I told you, instead of just that, I said, well, why shouldn't I go beyond? And I went into the infomercial business. The first one was a real failure. The second one was a real success. And what was interesting about that is at that point in time, I lost most of my salon business. I remember going to seminars that I would put on, and one of the people told me, you know what, Dr. Murad, I'm not going to buy any more of your products. I said, why not? Don't you like them? Are they not good? She said, no, I love them. They're really good. But you know what? People are actually coming in and asking for them. I want to be exclusive. I don't want to be something that other people can buy all over. So the idea that this was a trend that I sort of foresaw, and I don't know why, that didn't exist at the time. And what I also did at the time is with the infomercial, I put a little coupon into the infomercial and recommended people go to a salon and get professional guidance as well as using my product. Even that, there was a failure because, again, the salons didn't enjoy that. They didn't want something that other people could buy on TV. So there were challenges up and down all the way.
Were there any challenges in selling your product that had to do with going through the FDA or getting any of these regulatory compliance issues to get your product out there, or that's not something that you had to deal with?
My products are cosmetics, classified as that, and so there wasn't a need to do that. I didn't have anything that was a prescription. I had ingredients in it that were allowed by whatever federal regulations were for
Right.
cosmetics.
And after you launch and after this infomercial business keeps working, what are some of the things that happened along the way? I mean, it's been what 30, 31 years now that, the company has been going, and you become one of the leaders in the space. Um, what are some of the things that you learned along the way, and and what are the things that you've seen that you've done differently now than you did back when you guys first started?
Well, yeah, obviously, I learned a lot. I learned to skirt different things. I ended up really having people that worked well, and um, you know, um, financials. I had outside people who oversaw the finances, all of those things that any business person would know. But I had to learn that on my own. I didn't go to MBA school to get it. Um, Not sure how I can answer your question exactly, but basically, just learning on the way, and actually making my own path. I never personally looked at what other people were doing. Like marketing now, I know our marketing team will look at all the other brands that are selling at the different retailers that we sell to. And they'll say, well, this person's doing this and this person's doing that. This seems to be selling. We should try to do this. I never, in the early days or even up until more recently, um, looked at what do other people do and um, made products based on what I saw with my patients. And as I looked and thought, I said, well, this is something that's really interesting. I should look at that and try to do that. So I tried to think these were uniquely mine rather than, and I'm sure I learned from others. I can't say I didn't. Um, Uniquely mine and not just being a copycat. Because you can copy what somebody else has done, but you'll never be as good as them. When you make your own, it is your own. It's uniquely yours, and that was a very important. I don't know that it was a lesson that I learned, or it was something that was in my DNA or whatever. But I tended to make products that were not necessarily anything like other people were doing.
Since that
And I
time of, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, since that time of launching the business, with the rise of e-commerce and it becoming easier and easier to sell directly to the customer without having to go through all these different channels, we've seen a lot of cosmetic companies come to the space, whether it's in skincare or just makeup or whatever it might be. And so I guess in your eyes, what, like, now with so many, I guess, brands or just products in the space, what really sets a brand apart from the rest? Is it what you said, like that continuous innovation and not being a copycat and really trying to figure out better ways, or is there more than that?
Well, it's definitely that. It's definitely uniquely and products that honestly work. It's very important. I mean, you can have products that contain this and that ingredient and say, this is why this is good for you, but if it's not helping the problem that you have, then it's not so good. So for us, it was very important that when we said this will help reduce the pigmentation or the appearance of the pigmentation on your skin, it would had to do that. It had to work. And we had proof of it because we took many before and after pictures. We had real people using it before. We studied. We would come up with a product concept and make formulas of it. We would have all the people in marketing look at it and try it on themselves. And if they were satisfied, we'd allow other people in the company to try it. Then we would have other people who not and had no experience with the company who would just were willing to be people who would try them and we could take before and after pictures. So we had proof that these products actually did what we say they were going to do, and we could show that. So that was really important to do that.
Doctor, I know you made a conscious effort to put, your name on this product, right? I mean, it wasn't a decision I assume that was made lightly. And you were the one that was developing these products and doing the research and development, etc. Do you still spend time, even today in the lab, creating and innovating and coming up with new formulas for different things, or not really?
I am involved, but not to the point that I used to be, obviously. And I don't know if you know, the brand was sold in 2015 to Unilever. And so, there I'm there. I'm the founder, and we go over the new products as they're being developed and have my input into it, and have certainly my stamp of this is good enough, and I'm happy with this. Not just good enough; it's got to be better than good enough. But the passion that I have now, in a way, relates to the products, but it relates to it in a sense of total wellness, of understanding how any product that goes out will be helping the whole person and not just their skin. Many years ago, I developed the concept of what I call inclusive health, meaning everything is included, and the idea that skincare is healthcare. People don't think of the word skincare as being healthcare. They think of skincare as just getting a Botox shot or getting a laser or having this new product. When you think about it, our skin is our largest organ and it protects every organ in our body. When we go out in the sun, what happens to us? We get a sunburn, but our skin gets red, but we also feel tired, lethargic, maybe headache, stomachache. Well, what happened is our skin got damaged and the environment damaged our skin, penetrated in the bloodstream and affected every organ in the body. So the idea that without proper skin care, we cannot take care of our rest of our body. The reverse is true, because if your heart's not healthy, you're not going to have good circulation and your skin will be very pallid. The other thing that was very important as a concept is what I call the water principle. If you ask anybody, is your skin drier today than it was 10 years ago? The answer will be yes. And the answer means that in order, a concept of understanding aging, there are over 300 different theories of aging, but the final common pathway of every single one of them is we go from a stage of full hydration to less and less hydration. Our skin becomes drier and drier, thinner and thinner. So does every cell in our body. It becomes drier and drier, thinner and thinner, and more sensitive to disease and aging. So the concept of the combining of understanding cellular hydration and that skincare is healthcare is very, very near and dear to the whole philosophy of Murad. Been mine, and this is what I've spoken about for over 25 years. So, what I've always recommended is what I call internal skincare. Internal skincare came out with supplements way back in 1994, which helped with acne and reduce the appearance of lines and wrinkles and improve the SPF of sunscreens, combining with using sunscreens. So what you ate, what you put in your body, affected your skin, but it also affected the rest of your body. In 2003, I coined the term cultural stress. Cultural stress is the stress of modern living, the rules and regulations, the digital dependency. What we're seeing today is cultural stress in spades. Cultural stress is when we sit at home, now we're COVID-19, we get everything delivered. We don't go out that much. So we're sitting at home. We have this sitting disease, a sedentary lifestyle. We're binge watching all these TVs and things like that. Social media, we're sitting around. Our sitting there encourage us to sit more and do less and less activity, which leads to chronic disease, isolation, loneliness, depression, and anxiety. And I've written many papers about this concept, and the idea of understanding society is changing us, and we have to address stress in a new way. There's regular stress, like a broken arm. We go to the doctor and we get it fixed. But cultural stress is constant, pervasive, and ever increasing. We have no control over how COVID-19 came about. But it's causing us to have more sedentary lifestyle, more chronic disease, more anxiety, more loneliness. And we have to deal with it. So, and also the idea of doing some exercise, again, not having the sedentary lifestyle. When you do exercise, ignoring all of the other things that happen, you also are building more fat. Fat is only 10% water. A muscle is 70% water. So the more muscle you have, the more hydrated you are. So this concept of wellness, this concept of wellness is unique to Murad, and it's based on years of my philosophy, understanding cultural stress, understanding the cellular hydration picture, and knowing, if nothing else, skincare is healthcare. And the products we're making now target certain centers in your skin that encourage you to have better skin, reducing the appearance of wrinkles, reducing pigmentation, reducing inflammatory processes on your skin.
What I was trying to say was that this is a very timely discussion, considering obviously the situation that all of us are in, and the importance of continuously trying to reduce our stress levels, our anxiety, connecting with other people, and trying to almost feel as normal as we possibly can by still following, you know, the stay-at-home guidelines, etc. In fact, one of the things that I personally experienced when I was at my previous employer was when I had those high levels of stress and, wasn't able to really work out as much as I would have liked to and eat as well as I would have liked to. I started developing alopecia, which I had never even, heard of, right? And I started just losing hair all over my beard. And as soon as I left my employer within, a couple months, as my stress levels began to normalize, I saw an almost like immediate improvement, right? And that's when I started thinking about what you were talking about, which is it's not just what you put on your face and your skin, it's also what you put in your mouth and, what you do on a daily basis that has, an impact, right? And I think that that applies to all aspects of life and in all aspects of business even is, it's not only the external, but it's also the internal, whether it's of the company, whether it's the people, right? Focus on both of those things. Um, so I'm really, interested in kind of that discussion and delving deeper into it. But I am also curious. You brought up the point of, Unilever acquiring Murad in 2015. What was that experience like for you? What was the process like? Was it easy to let go of, this baby that you had birthed and raised after all those years?
Well, first of all, I'd like just to say one more thing about this concept of cultural stress and everything else. To me, it's not new. This has been, as I say, I coined that term way back in 2003, understanding it. And it's been my passion. And if I could do anything in this world is have people truly understand it and see how we can help it. And we are targeting those stress levels, allowing you to sleep better, reducing your stress, things like that, with topical agents. So there are agents that will help calm your skin, but in the sense it's helping you in other ways. As far as the sale to Unilever, we did not approach them; they approached us. And at that time, um, was a family business. My nephew was um, the general manager. My son was in charge of product development. My daughter was in the marketing area, and we were getting along really well. And I began to see the beginnings of some changes. I began to see that as a company to really allow my passion, which includes this whole wellness concept, which is what brought, I think, Unilever to Murad because they realized that this was something that was important, that was something that they could bring to the next level that I couldn't. I was not able to at this stage of my life. And I could see that it was an opportunity to allow my mission, which is to help people live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives in everything I do, to grow and prosper. And it would be a way to allow the next level, the next generation to take over. So it was a challenging thing. There were discussions in the family whether we should continue on our own or we should go forward. And at the end, I realized that to really go forward, it had to go. There's a saying: if you really love somebody, you have to love them to the point of allowing them to leave. And that's in a way not letting it leave. Still involved in Murad. I go to the office every day. Of course, now with COVID-19, I'm not there every day, but I have gone every day. So I think it was a challenge, but I think it was the right decision.
Are you someone that, like, when you're out and about, or I guess like when we used to be out and about, when you see someone that doesn't have good skin, are you like really bothered by that? Going back to like your first words in English, which was "Let me see your hand." Is that like was that like a foreshadow? Like, is that something that like really like, or are you not that attached to it?
No, of course. I see somebody with bad skin. I wish I could help them. I There were experiences where in the past I would go up to somebody and say something about it and give them a card and say, here, I can give you some samples or something like that. And over time, I guess, it wasn't appropriate to just go up to people and tell them, you know, and they felt bad, and maybe they didn't feel bad about their skin, and I made them feel worse. So I don't do that anymore.
I know there was a point or a period in your life where you got into painting. I don't know if that's one of your paintings we see in the background there, but tell us a little bit about that and if that's something that you still do today, especially now that we're quarantined. Are you still painting?
That one was one of my old ones. I did that way back in 2009. Yeah, I still do painting. And again, all of these things that we've been talking about, uh, let failure lead to success, allow the unique you to blossom, um, are lessons that I've learned. So what happened to me is I I had an eye challenge way back in 2007, and I I had a retinal detachment. So I was actually, as I was experiencing it, I was in Hong Kong, and my eyes got blurry, and was on my last leg of a 14-day trip international, trying to encourage business. And I was arriving on Sunday from Hong Kong. I called my wife before that and said, my eyes aren't feeling well. Could you make an appointment with the eye doctor? And so we had an eye doctor appointment on the morning of Monday. And when I went there, they put the thing on your eye. What do you see? And I could read in one eye. I could read the E and everything else. In the other eye, I could read nothing. I said, when are you going to put it up? And they said, oh my gosh. So I was really desperately had a challenge where if I didn't have surgery within hours, I would have been blind forever in that one eye. Fortunately, I went to the best doctor, got in, was able to do the surgery that day. And But the result was I had what's called a vitrectomy, and I had to put my chin on my chest for a month. So I couldn't sleep on my back. I had to sleep on my stomach, and I couldn't eat. And so a year before that, I had taken a lesson in art, and that teacher said, buy this equipment and this and that. And I did, but I knew I wasn't going to ever use it. And my wife said, look, this is your opportunity. Why don't you start doing art? So what I did is I was on what's like, you've ever had a massage, you put your head down in that little thing and you can look down, and then your hands are free and then you're lying.
Mhm.
So, that's what I was using. I had a TV there when I could watch TV with the challenge for that 1 month when I had to look down. But I started doing art. And there was one thing I never thought I'd be interested in, but that led me to doing art, and it's become a passion of mine. I have over 600 art pieces that I've created in my lifetime, and also I think it brought color into my life. It brought a little bit more passion, so it kind of went along with all the things I've just been talking about with the wellness and the failure leads to success and things like that we've just been talking about.
And Dr. Murad, speaking of colors, even if somebody looks at your pictures online or, we're looking at you right now and you have a very eclectic mix of shirts that you wear. Where do you get these from?
Well, I have other brands, but most of my brands I use only from a brand called Robert Graham, and there are others. So many other different brands that I go to, but most of mine are Robert Graham. They have their own stores. They're online like everybody else is, and they're in department stores.
When you think back on, what you've built and, the people that you've impacted and the people that you still continue to impact, you know, do you ever think that this is more than what you could have imagined? This is truly incredible, right? Somebody who was an immigrant, then a doctor, went to Vietnam and then ends up, healing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and really affecting the way that they feel about themselves, right? It's more than just, your skin. It's the first thing people see when they look at somebody. So how does that make you all feel?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to do this. I never imagined where I would end or where I would be. But again, I think somehow or other, what was imbued in me was that I was going to be successful. Um, and regardless of any negatives, knowing my family coming from relative wealth in Iraq to being broke where we had barely enough to eat, um, to my father still being happy when even despite that he just made the best of what he had available. So the ability um, to not fear failure. Fear of failure leads to failure is one of my favorite sayings as well. And when we're afraid to fail, then we will fail. So yes, but I never dreamed it would be this, and I am so fortunate. And the only thing I can hope for is because of my fortunate ability that I can lead other people that I touch to have happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives, just like I have. The more they see my story, I hope that will encourage them to lead in the same way, whatever their passion is. And sometimes we don't know what our passion is. As I said, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, a pharmacist, a lawyer. I ended up a doctor. Didn't know I wanted to be a dermatologist. I wanted to be a surgeon. Didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur at all. I had no idea that that would be where I would end up. But we all have wonderful potential, and it's up to us to make the best of it. I have and I wish I could show you, but I make a squiggle on a piece of paper. See a big white piece of paper and a squiggle. Imagine that in your mind. And and then I ask people, what do you see? And the squiggle's in the middle of this white piece of paper. So if I ask you that question and the squiggle is a squiggle, make up, you two guys decide what a squiggle looks like. A squiggle.
A worm.
A worm, what else does a squiggle look like?
The journey of life.
And that's
Oh.
deep.
Well, you both got it right. So most people would come up with the worm because they look at the squiggle and because they're not looking at the whole page. So that squiggle is what you think your potential is, what your opportunity is. But that whole white space is your true potential. So no matter what you think you can do, what you think your potential is, what you think your opportunity is, it's really not enough. It's only a minute amount of your true potential. So allow the unique you to blossom. Each one of you is uniquely different. If I give 2 words, forgive yourself, to 100 people, I'll get similar answers of what that means, but they're not the same. So we all see things differently. We're all uniquely different, and we all have unique potential. So I encourage everybody that I talk to encourage that uniqueness that they have that nobody else in the world has. Don't try to emulate. Don't try to be like somebody else because you'll never succeed. They're the best of themselves. You're not going to be, but you can be the best you. So allowing the unique you to blossom and allow passion to lead you. Make your mark on the canvas of life and let it direct you. Don't limit yourself.
I love that. I love that. Dr. Murad, you have an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And you've built an incredible brand and career. And we can't wait to see, what you do next. I don't know if there's a website where we could see your paintings, but if you do ever have a chance to put them up, let us know, and we'd love to check them out.
Yeah, I have a daily painting and a daily affirmation. It's Dr. Murad. Look up Dr. Murad on the Apple Store, and I have my own free app. So Dr. Murad Inspirations, I think is what it's called, but it's Dr. Murad, and you'll see a picture, and you click on it. It's a free app, and every day there's a new saying and a new piece of art.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. We wish you continued health, continued prosperity and success, and hopefully we can meet in person someday once all this stuff is over. But thanks again for being on the show and sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Dr. Murad.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure, my unique pleasure. Thank you for having me.